Two more board members incoming.
Oh, shoot. What am I doing?
I ask myself that every day.
So why did you not want the duty of letting people in? I can't imagine. It's getting hard to keep up.
All right, it says it's streaming, yet I don't see it on my...
It's working for me. I just clicked the link in the agenda and I can see us.
Oh, good. Okay.
On a slight delay, but I can see us.
Yeah, there's a minute delay on it, so that's great.
Although, oh, never mind.
Okay. So do we have board members here? We're ready to go, huh? All right, let me...
I don't know what happened to Deb Sikowski. She was joining and then never quite made it in, I don't think.
There she is again.
There we go.
All right. We'll bring to order the Board of Ed special meeting of September 24th, 2020. Just so everybody knows, this meeting is being recorded. It's also being streamed live, and that information is on the agenda. We ask that all participants mute themselves to prevent meeting interference, and that if you're on the phone, you can unmute yourself using *6. I also ask that everyone wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking so that people listening by phone are able to identify the person who's talking. And so we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll see if I can find my flag. All right, can you see it? All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and that will bring us to our public participation. So during the first public participation, the board welcomes commentary regarding items on our agenda. After being recognized, if you would please state your name and address for the record. We request that speakers be respectful and limit their comments to not more than 3 minutes. The Board of Education does not discuss personnel items or student matters in public. And then during the second public participation, commentary may address the agenda or may introduce new issues for the board to consider in the future. The board does not engage in dialogue during either of the public comment periods. And if you want more information or answers to specific questions, you can email the Board of Education at the address is on the agenda. So if anybody on the phone would like to speak, now is the time to speak to items that are on the agenda. You can unmute yourself with a *6. Is there anybody on the phone who'd like to speak? All right. I'm sensing no public participation, so we'll close out public participation. I will note that we had a couple of emails that addressed agenda items this evening. And we'll move to old business. We have the discussion and possible action on the potential COVID-related costs. This is really what inspired this meeting, because at our last meeting, we were trying to understand how we might deal with the expenses, the additional expenses that we will be experiencing this year due to COVID. We had not been able to transfer our surplus from last year to the non-lapsing fund, which we would normally use for that. So tonight, maybe at this very moment, actually, the Board of Finance meeting starts at 7:30, but the Board of Finance will be considering a recommendation from the Board of Selectmen to appropriate $400,000 into the capital non-recurring fund for COVID-related expenses. So the Board of Selectmen passed that resolution, or that the other evening, and the Board of Finance will consider it this evening, followed by the Legislative Council at their next meeting. So I don't know if board members would still like to discuss ways that we might need to consider dealing with the COVID expenses. And I'll throw out some examples of what I've thought of. It might include something like directing the Board of Ed chair and/or superintendent to write a letter to the Board of Selectmen requesting a special fund to be established. It might include discussion of whether the Board of Ed should put a spending freeze in place, as we've done in previous years when we anticipated costs above the budget. Not that I'm recommending we do that, but that is something that might be appropriate for this discussion. Or perhaps asking the business director to provide some additional accounting on a monthly basis. And I think we talked about that at the last meeting, in terms of outlining what the COVID expenses are that have been incurred and what we expect to incur in the future. So does anybody want to add to the discussion, start the discussion? Yes, Mr. Cruson.
There we go. I guess my biggest concern at the moment is, because the money is not in the non-lapsing fund where we could reach it in the most expeditious way, we're looking at a rather lengthy process to get any funds that we might need, as well as multiple points where it could get voted down so that we don't get it, which puts us in a very reactive position. So I'm concerned about, I don't like the idea of having to go through a spending freeze. But at the same time, I don't like the idea that we could run out of money at any given point and be in trouble because we've spent more than we can make available. So my big concern is, I guess, how much have we actually spent versus what's anticipated at this point, and looking at where we are in a budget position now versus where we are in a budget position now. Are we already showing a deficit from where we might be, or how best to gauge based on the information we have now for the position we're in now, versus, because unfortunately it's going to be hard to roadmap what's going to be spent in the future. I think all we can do is watch what's now and try to get ahead of it, to ask for money before we're desperate to have it and have to go into some extreme spending freeze or cuts or something like that.
So just to clarify, the Board of Selectmen, if this action goes through with the $400,000 into the capital non-recurring fund, that money, once it's appropriated, it would be available for our business director to easily access it. It's beyond that $400,000 that would need to be of concern. And the
Right.
Board of Selectmen did indicate that they would be willing to reconsider things as we get updated financials.
Right, but is the 400 enough to cover what has already been spent? Is it a little bit more than what's already been spent? Those are the kinds of questions that crop up in my mind, in that if it's enough to cover what's already been spent, then okay, budget-wise, we're in an okay position right now, but we don't know what it's going to look like next month if we start to slide into a deficit position. And then we have to start worrying about, well, what about the next appropriation that needs to be made that could take a couple months to come down? Or that's my concern is, and I don't know if the 400 covers just what we've already spent, if it covers less than that, if it covers more than that, so we have a little bit of wiggle room.
So maybe that's a question for Ms. Vadas. And I don't know if you can answer that now or if you want to wait until the next meeting to bring that information to us, but I think that would be good information to have.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. So I've been preparing financials to see exactly where we are and comparing it to the draft that was originally presented to the board. And I've locked into all the expenses that have happened, the ones that are going to happen. And I've come up with a number that I feel pretty confident about right now. And it's
I'm flipping stuff from here into here, and I couldn't figure out how.
I'm sorry, I just had some feedback. I don't know if somebody was talking or.
Yeah, it was a phone. We muted it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm coming close to the original number of $1.5 million. I'm about 1.2, and there's still a lot of expenses that are going to happen. There's some that I feel right now, actually the majority of the bulk of it is in. There's going to be things that we're not seeing yet that are going to come in, and I'm trying to anticipate what those are. I've also been looking at the savings. So there are some offsets. And again, referring back to the original document that was presented by Mr. Benkowski, he showed a savings of, excuse me, just one second, let me find it, $245,000. I have tied into some of those that are going to actually happen, such as a transportation credit, but there's still some unknowns. There's the PD, there's paraprofessional days, but you know, the things that we do know, we have the $400,000 from the capital non-recurring account, and I believe it takes maybe about a month, correct me if I'm wrong, to actually have access to those funds. And we do have the $380,000 from the Corona Relief Grant, and that application just came in today. So those funds we can actually expend against right now. So there's a little bit left over from Novo. So I'm looking at right now about $780,000 that I feel confident that we can use to offset our expenses.
But have we already spent more than $780,000?
We have. But I don't really feel that we're in the need of a freeze right now. There's still a lot of encumbrances. There's still a lot of employee turnover going on. There's, you know, by the end of September, when all the encumbrances are in and we have a better picture of what's going on with the certified staff and the paraprofessional union, which is a big one right now, we're really struggling to fill those positions. So I think the end of September going into October, we'll have a much clearer view of where we are financially. Like I said, I don't feel that we're in the need for a freeze right now, but we have to, you know, kind of sit tight and wait for more information to come in.
So I guess it sounds like to me, like at the very least, we might need a report more often so that we can keep a closer eye on this, because it sounds like, well, we already knew there was going to be a lot of unknowns, but it sounds like there's a lot of potential fluctuations in either side, and we don't clearly have things covered right now with the money that's available.
Right. Well, I agree with the fluctuations on each side. And again, you know, I'm looking at every account every day, talking to other directors, trying to, you know, in the A-team meetings, trying to figure out what the needs are, where the potential potholes might be.
Can I just interject that again? I want. Yes. First of all, the staffing, as Tanya mentioned, is a big issue. The other is the technology. So there was a point when we do not have our Chromebooks. We do not know when our Chromebooks are coming. I have given, I said to Ann Uberti and others who asked a few days ago if we had to look for other alternatives that might be more readily available, even if the cost is a bit higher. I would want to do that because at this point we don't have any assurances that they're coming in. So, and that makes me very nervous because right now we have a limited number of technology at the building level if we when we need it. So because we've really, like I think I said this at the last meeting, they were flying off the shelves as people needed them. So as families needed them. So I think the technology number could change. And that can change, you know, it could change significantly. It could change, it might not change at all, but again, I'm watching that number I think will be the most significant change, if anything.
So I think maybe if we have an update at our next meeting, at our first, we don't usually have a financial report at the first meeting of the month, but maybe we can do something, just a COVID update in the first meeting next month. And then we'll have a better idea if the Legislative Council has approved the $400,000 appropriation, and we can take that all into account.
Michelle, can I jump in?
And I see, yes, 3 people. So Ms. Zukowski, then Ms. Harriman Stites, and then Mr. Dalia.
I suggest maybe we could think about a practice where every 2 months, the first meeting of the month, we could look and see how much we have expended, how much we have encumbered, and how much we expect. And for the expended and encumbered that has not been addressed with COVID specific funds, that we then turn around and make another request for an additional special appropriations. It might be every 2 months. It could conceivably be every 3 months. But I would think the last thing we want is to put a lockdown on our spending if we don't need it. And they say that we're going to get the funds to deal with COVID, and let's at this point take them at their word. So I would say October 1st, we look at what is expended, we look at what is encumbered. We have the 380, we've got the 400. We'll see if that takes us for the next 2 months. And then 2 months from October, so December, the first meeting in December, we repeat the activity and we see how much more we need to ask for the, expended and encumbered. We can tell them we know we're expecting X more. It's up to you if you want us to come back every 2 months to you, or if you want to give us a little bit of wiggle room.
Okay. Ms. Harriman Stites?
I just had sort of a silly question. Where did the $400,000 number come from?
Oh,
Is that too long of a question? I'm just wondering if that was a need that we had expressed at some point, because I'll be honest, like the $400,000 number was news to me, and it doesn't seem like that's actually even enough for what we know we need already. So I guess I'm just a little bit concerned about that. And I also, I'm glad you made the point that we do need to revisit it sooner rather than later, even just the 400,000, because that's actually not money that we can yet count on until this meeting happens tonight at the Board of Finance level, and then the meeting at the Legislative Council. And then I guess I also don't understand clearly the process for us to request those funds. So those are just questions. I'm not sure who has the answers. If anyone here at this meeting does, I'd be happy to hear, because I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. I want to obviously make it work in the most collaborative way possible, but I just want to really fully understand the process. And I think we really haven't been kept abreast of that.
So I will just, from the Board of Selectmen meeting, what they have in figuring out the 400,000 was that there was $380,000 anticipated in coronavirus relief funds from the state. There was $245,000 in identified savings in the current Board of Ed budget. Now that was, Mr. Binkowski spoke to the fact that there were also anticipated costs that might offset that. And then in addition to the 400,000 that they would be appropriating, it would total 1,025,000. And I think that, they said that they would revisit what the needs were as the year went on. So that's part of your question. And then the other part of your question is, how do we ask for funds in the future? I think, they're expecting an update from us as the year progresses, and we would need to keep them apprised of what, whether we're running in a deficit or whether we have a surplus.
No, I was more wondering how it was that we request access, like how do we access the funds that they do approve for our use?
Ms.
We asked for that. Excuse me, may I speak?
So Mr. D'Elia and then Ms. Vadas can answer Ms. Harriman-Steit's question.
Mrs. Harriman-Steitz, we asked, when I was at the Legislative Council meeting, I asked them specifically to tell us how we are going to be able to access this money. So I'm hopeful that they'll tell us, because I don't want any more, or I don't want it to be ambiguous or unclear exactly the process that we have to take.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. We're in agreement on that for sure.
So Ms. Vadas, you can speak to how we would access the 400,000 if it is appropriated. How would we access that?
It's actually quite simple. I would work with the town finance director, and it's really just a matter of a journal entry, and we put the invoices against the particular fund. So it's pretty easy once it's in place. We've done it before in the past. We're actually doing it right now with the tech and the plant. I don't know if you remember, they had reduced our budget the current year, so we do have money in there now being used. So it's pretty simple process.
So that process is once the appropriation is made, the process is fairly simple. It's the part that you're wondering about is what happens if we run short, and then we would have to go through we would have to make a request of the Board of Selectmen. It would have to go to the Board of Finance, the Legislative Council. That's the lengthy process that would have to happen.
Yeah, that's correct. I think it's the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and it goes to Legislative Council, and then they appropriate the funds. But it is a longer process.
Yes, Ms. Zukowski?
I believe the Board of Finance is a recommendation. It is not an approval or not approval. So basically, it'll get to the Legislative Council.
Okay. Anybody else with questions right now?
Michelle,
Mr. Voros?
at no time do I think that the Board of Education should impose a freeze on anything. These teachers, administrators, students do not need to have anything taken away from them or stopped because of this money issue. The money is there, and it'll eventually get to us. So to put these people with the stress that they're going through now and then impose a freeze on them is ludicrous. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anybody else? Mr. D'Elia?
I think that we should wait till the end of October for that update. I think the CIP meeting, there's going to be a CIP meeting between the two meetings, and we can visit it with Tanya then, and then bring it to the board after we've looked at it. So that's what I would recommend. If anybody, I don't know what you all think of that, but that will be a CIP agenda item, and hopefully every month we'll have meeting to discuss this. And the second point, while I have the floor, is I don't think freezes are really even a consideration at this point, at this early in the year. So I think that we should not be hasty. I don't know if hasty is the right word, but I don't feel the same sense of urgency that maybe others are feeling, and maybe they can tell me why. But I think that I don't think a freeze is even remotely possible at this point in time in the school year. The freezes would come at the end of the year, and we've been assured by members of the Legislative Council on record that they will support any COVID expenses that we have. And I think that we're going to stay way ahead of this. But doing something in 2 weeks, I think, is, I just don't think that we need to be moving so quickly. Maybe, Lori, maybe you can tell me if I'm off by that for the freezes, but.
No, you're not off by that. It's still way too early, and I know Tanya would agree. Again, it's a wait and see. We're okay now. There's a lot that has to happen, and we're watching it, but it is definitely too early to even think of any kind of freeze. It's just not necessary.
May I continue?
Please do.
So my thinking is, when we start talking about this and having Tanya and everybody work on this, I just, everybody's working really hard on things that are really critical for the children. And I think that we should not exercise patience, but at the same time be diligent, but not be hasty. I guess that's my point. And I think that we can stay ahead of this, well ahead of this, and be smart and be proactive. And by the way, I'm not happy about all the stuff that happened with the non-lapsing fund. I think I made that clear before. But anyways, I just, knowing how the budget works and knowing that the school year is very, very young right now, or we're very early in the school year, I think that we should let the CIP committee discuss it, and then we can bring it to you at the end of October. That gives us a full month. I don't know.
Okay. That sounds reasonable. I want to make clear that I brought up the spending freeze not because anybody has suggested that. I only brought it up because that's a way that we've dealt with issues in the past, and there have been years where we have had a spending freeze very early. I don't know if it was September, but it certainly was very early in the year that we had a spending freeze. All right, anybody else? So we'll get a report in October, I guess, with the financial report. That would be good if we could have more details about the COVID expenses in the financial report, maybe an additional sheet somehow that is added to that. And I think we'll just keep an eye on it if everybody's okay with that. All right, so moving on to our next.
Mr. D'Elia wants to say something.
Mr. D'Elia?
Hi, sorry. I just wanted to make one more final comment. I do think that we should ask for the money as soon as we need it, though. And I don't know if I think that we're all in agreement on that, but I just want to state for the record that when we realize that we need the money because we've spent money on COVID that we don't have money to use for, we should ask for that money right away. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the discussion and possible action on the budget calendar revision. So just before we introduce a motion, I guess, just can we talk through the concept, and I will turn the floor over to Mr. D'Elia as he had a suggestion on the calendar.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this over the last, since our last meeting, and I just was looking at the sheer volume of meetings that are required, and they're definitely important meetings. But what I keep coming back to is that as Board of Education members, we're very pressed for time, and we kind of crunch our time so that everybody else can have. So that we can make sure everybody else gets plenty of time. And I think that we should possibly consider some adjustments to allow us to have more time to consider the budget. Shall I continue? Yeah. Okay. So I was looking, the Board of Finance is an advisory board, and that was made very clear at the Legislative Council meeting, that the Board of Finance is an advisory board, that they make recommendations, but then the Legislative Council decides. And I was looking at that section for the Board of Finance, and I would like to consolidate 2 of their meetings into one, and then push our meetings back a week to give us more time with the budget. And it would also give the staff more time to prepare and, you know, get it ready for us, because we're really the ones that know the budget, and I know that we don't have the final say, but we are the ones that make the motions to adjust the budget, and we know the budget, and that's my thinking. So I was looking at items, I don't know if you have your calendar in front of you, but I was thinking items 16 and 17 could almost be combined. And then we could ask the Board of Finance to submit questions in writing, and then we can respond to them. And then, you know, they can make their recommendations at the next meeting. Also, that would allow us to push items 10 through 14 back a full week. I was thinking it would be nice if Dr. Rodriguez, sorry, I keep saying Lori, if Dr. Rodriguez gave us her presentation, and then we had a little extra time to think about what she presented, so that we could ask thoughtful questions. So I was really, and I think a member brought up that looking for a little more time for board members. So I don't know, that's what I'm throwing out there, and I would love to hear anybody else's thoughts. And if I'm off the mark, I totally respect your opinions. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Cruson. And then Ms. Harriman States after that.
The one thing that stands out to, well, a couple things stand out to me, but the big thing is there are a couple notes about town charter deadlines in there. And if you were to push 14 out a week, it comes really close to that February 14th deadline that's referenced. And I'm not sure about the note on 15, the at least 5 days prior to public hearing per town charter. So I don't know who has the information to be able to comment on what's available within those town charter deadlines, because those are going to be our those are going to be huge impediments to making too many changes.
My thinking, may I speak?
Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
My thinking on 14, Mr. Cruson, was that looks like it's just a budget submission. Looks like it just needs to be submitted, and I'm hoping that that's just I think it says finance internal on the right. I think it's just a delivery of a budget. So that's why I was thinking that might provide us a little wiggle room.
Yeah, but there's only 3 days between that and 13. I don't know how much time is needed, because I know that after we have our last adoption meeting, we make all those changes, it requires changes to the budget. I don't know if that takes 3 days or if that can be condensed. I'd hate to rush the business office on something like that, but
okay.
I don't know if Tanya wants to comment, because she's familiar with that portion.
Yeah, so the February 5th, I typically have to get that over to the town finance director by the 3rd. And then he gets it in the paper for the 5th. So he's anxious to get that information by the 2nd or the 3rd of February. And then going forward, I know it says by charter, they have to have the public hearing 5 days prior, or they have to have it in the paper 5 days prior. So that is by charter. I don't know, honestly, if they would combine both of those meetings. That's a possibility. But the 5th is pretty much a hard deadline, unless they pushed everything forward, which I don't know that they would do that.
I mean, just to sort of summarize, I'm in favor of trying to find a way to have more time for us to look at it if we can. I just worry about those deadlines. So if we can resolve those, then I'm all in favor of trying to have more time to look at and think over everything.
Yeah, can I just say, I think the other problem you'll run into is the winter break. That's the week of the 15th and 16th. So, you know, if you go up to that break, I mean, you're just getting further and further out. That's just my opinion, that they're going to be very tight with their deadlines. But I agree with you. I'd love to have more time too.
So, let's see, Ms. Harriman States, did you have something?
No, I mean, I was going to say, I'm certainly open to ideas that give us more time, similar to what Mr. Cruson mentioned. I am just not sure about us making adjustments that would impact other boards without their input. I mean, that gives me pause. So I don't believe that without knowing if they would be on board with this adjusted calendar, I would be comfortable doing that at this point. And I'm glad that you brought up, Mrs. Vadas, the 5th deadline, because I was really focused on that February 14th, thinking then that we had until until right before February 14th to deliver it. But then you really do have to back it out a little bit more than that, which makes it difficult. So I'm all in favor of creative solutions. I just don't want to have this be seen as us trying to not give other boards enough time. But I do believe that there are way too many budget presentations that the board and the administrative staff has to make.
Yeah, so Mr. D'Elia, I thought that was actually what your focus might be, was the number of meetings where we are meeting with the other boards and perhaps proposing having them do a more condensed process of, we present, say, to the Board of Finance, and then have questions submitted, and then we show up to answer the questions, and those are the 2 times that we visit the Board of Finance.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, that's why I was trying to consolidate. But I agree with Rebecca that we'd have to run it by them first. I was just trying to, I think my experiences have been, it's an incredible amount of meetings.
Yeah.
And, I was trying to find a way to, Dr. Rodriguez struck a chord with me at the Legislative Council meeting when she said that, the administrative staff is tired. They've been working basically for well over a year now. And the teachers are tired. And I know tired is not maybe the best word, but people are, and to look at this calendar, it's a lot. And especially if we go to meetings and there's really no questions, and, I thought there could be an easier way to consolidate this.
I wonder if we can just have a conversation without moving deadlines, so to speak, or impacting deadlines, just to have conversations around that very thing with the board chairs, so that, looking at the list of meetings that we go to, other than the important ones like the presentation, and they do submit questions. So maybe instead of over 3 meetings, we have a conversation. I'm sure that's the same for them. It's not that they can't meet more often. It's just that when we would have to be there, might be. Is that what you're getting at, Mr. D'Elia? Because we can certainly have those conversations.
Yeah, and that's good advice. Maybe I can ask Dr. Koo to reach out to those chairs and just see if there's a way we can consolidate it.
Yeah.
And just make it a little more efficient for everyone, without jeopardizing integrity.
And I think even given this year and where we are and what we don't even know it will look like during the budget season can be impactful right there.
So I can absolutely do that. Reach out to the other chairs and see if there's a way that we can make this more efficient. Just another thing that has occurred to me is that, and I know some other towns are doing this. Every year I reach out to the other board chairs and extend the invitation that they come to our budget workshops and the presentations so that they have an idea of, their members have an idea of what the questions are that have already been asked, so that there's no duplication of effort. But I'm wondering if we extend, and there's some participation, but not enough to reduce the amount of times that we attend meetings on the end of the process. So I'm wondering if we invited them to come and even ask questions during our workshop meetings, if that would alleviate any of this, and whether board members, how do you feel about that? All right, I'm not seeing any. All right, so I will reach out to the other board chairs just to see if there's a way that we can look at consolidating the number of times that we're attending their meetings. And I will again extend the invitation that their members attend our meetings and listen to the conversations that we have and the deliberations that we have. All right.
Can I say one more thing, please?
Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
I would like to find a way to get a little more time with the budget. I don't know, it doesn't have to be today, and I am not interested in cutting into the time that Tanya and Dr. Reed made clear they need to get us the budget. So that original date, that delivery date, I don't want to change that, but I would love to figure out a way to get just a little more time with the budget if we could. I don't know if it's even possible now that I see that, because Tanya, you did point out, I thought I was looking at the February 14th thing the whole time too. So once you pointed that out, I just changed everything. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how we, yes, Ms. Zukowski?
I'm just trying to look at the charter. That's why you see my fingers as you were all talking. And I believe it said that the Board of Finance will hold a public hearing before like the first March. I have to get to where it was.
On the
First
calendar,
Wednesday of
it
March.
says, yeah, not later than the first Wednesday in March per town charter.
Okay, but what they're doing is they're holding their public meeting. I need to get back to where it was.
February 11th.
Okay, is there a reason why they're holding the public meeting so early?
I think it's winter recess. But do we need to be there for the public hearing? Is that something, I don't remember. Dr. Rodriguez, do we participate in the public hearing? Or did?
I think we were there that night, yes.
But again,
Yes.
we're talking 3 weeks or so between when it's being scheduled right now and when it could be scheduled up until. So again, the question is, why is it, even before the 14th, when the charter very clearly says we have until the 14th. And I understand that Bob has to combine needs time to combine the two budgets, but why is the public hearing happening? It looks like before the 14th.
Well, it says that the no later than March 14th, does the budget go to the legislative, they need to have it to the legislative council by March?
And the legislative council has to have their public hearing not later than the last Wednesday in March.
Right.
So it's a very tight timeline if we follow the charter exactly. That might be why. I mean, it's just conjecture, but that's.
Yeah. It would be nice to know why that public meeting is happening. Workshop.
Well, I can reach out to the other board chairs.
Pardon?
I can reach out to the other board chairs and find out if there's any way to move things around at all.
Yeah, because by charter, we have until the 14th, and I understand that Bob will need time to merge the budgets, but why the Board of to give it to the Board of Finance, but why the public hearing is set for the 13th, which is 3 days before, which then mean Bob needs to have everything like a week before that to merge it. I mean, I just don't understand. And so having information on that would be good.
All right, go ahead.
If I recall, and I'm pretty sure this is accurate, the first night was a presentation. The first meeting to the Board of Finance was our presentation, Dr. Koo. The public hearing that evening, which was the second time we went to the Board of Finance, we answered questions that night. First was the public hearing, and that was the night after they had time to look at it and they had seen our presentation. That was really the night we answered most of our questions. The third night that we ended up, that was the third meeting listed, very few, that was more of a vote than anything else. So if, right, am I accurate on that?
Yes, I think so. But so I see, Ms. Lideline, I think you had your hand up a while ago and I
That's
missed
okay.
it.
I think it's all worked back from when they have to have the referendum and trying to make sure that each board has enough time with the budget, enough time to have their public meetings, and enough time to ask questions of both boards, because remember that they're not dealing with just one board's budget, they're dealing with both boards' budgets. So they have to have the opportunity to actually have both boards present and presenting and answering questions.
Yeah. So
Debbie, oh, may I?
Mr. Delia, yes.
Debbie, are you saying that it's basically, it's kind of, it is what it is, and it's, in your experience, we're not going to?
Yeah, I'm not saying that there's no room for movement, because as I've been on the board, the timing of certain meetings has fluctuated. So I'm not saying that there's no room for movement and it's worth having them take a look at it. But I would say that in some years it's tight. You also have to make accommodations for the fact that there could be inclement weather, which could affect the meeting dates. So there's a bunch of variables that come into play. There's also school holidays, but they try to make sure that there's enough time in between each point to make any adjustments that need to be made, and to make sure that the public has enough time to view materials and to speak to it. Some years there's nobody who comes to the public hearings and speaks about the budget, and then other years the room is packed. So you really can't determine how long that process is even going to take. So I think they just kind of try to work back from when the referendum has to be in order to make sure that there's time for every step of the process.
Thank you very much.
Excellent points. So yeah, I will reach out to the other board chairs and then we can, this is certainly something we can talk about again at a future meeting. It's a while before we get into the budget. So I'll do that and I'll update you in my chair report, if that's okay. So is that okay, Mr. Delia? Did you want any more discussion?
No, thank you, and I appreciate everybody. That's why I wanted to bring it to everyone to hear what everyone had to say. So, or I'm sorry, that's why I requested it be put on the agenda. So, and I appreciate what everybody says. I just was trying to figure out a way to, one, consolidate, and two, give us a little more time with the budget. So, without burdening, without cutting short the delivery date. So thank you.
Yeah, and given the stress of on everybody this year, you know, having a little bit of a break would be a good thing. So we'll see what we can do. All right, so we'll move on to our new business. So we have discussion on the board. I'm sorry, was anybody trying to get my attention? Ms. Dukowski?
Yeah, when you talk with the other boards,
Yes.
I know that they need to get information, and that's a big part of, you know, a lot of the time, everybody has a month. But I'm just curious, you said maybe they could come and listen and get, if they could overlap, you know, so that they're getting information as we're working through our budget and hearing our workshops. It seems like they could do a portion of what they would normally do in their month by overlapping a bit with our discussions. And so if you could talk with them about that, maybe that would help.
Okay, I'll reiterate that. All right, so moving on to the discussion on Board of Ed business office reporting structure. So this is for discussion only. The first selectman introduced a concept that he wanted us to consider. Dr. Rodriguez has spoken to him, and I have as well. It would involve a change in the reporting structure in the business office. And so I will hand it over to Dr. Rodriguez to talk to this.
Thank you, Dr. Koo. So as you mentioned, this was really more of, I consider it more of an informal discussion with the first selectman, which really focused primarily on the possibility, now that we have our new director of business, to really start to rethink maybe the structure of the director and the director of finance on the town side and how this might work in the future, to look at increasing the oversight and some of the evaluation responsibility. And this related to the director of finance on the town side. And of course, this would involve looking at areas where perhaps the municipality and the board naturally converge, have similar functions, such as payroll and other accounting structures. Within that conversation, Dan Rosenthal mentioned Mansfield and that they had a similar type structure, at least that's what he thought. And it just so happens that I know the superintendent there quite well. So I did promise that I would reach out and have a lengthy conversation with her. First of all, just so you know and give you context, Mansfield is much smaller. They do not even have a high school within their town. In that structure, there is one finance director that handles both the town and the board. So it's clearly a shared service. It has been that way for quite some time. And I'm fairly certain, actually positive, there are other districts of similar size that have utilized that same structure. And again, she had positives to say about that. But again, as she said to me, it's the only and she's come from other much larger districts where that wasn't possible. But in that particular case, they have a good relationship. She works very well with her director of finance. I asked her the question, you know, she knows how much larger we are and that we have both obviously now a director of business and a town director of finance. One of the thing she mentioned is if we ever move to a shared service, we have to think about all of the other responsibilities that our director of business, who is now Tanya, what that role encompasses. And when we hired, whether it was Ron or Tanya, or even going back further, the reason we asked for they need the 085 is because the magnitude of the position includes transportation and facilities and food services and so on and so forth. Now that is not what was being suggested. I just want to clarify that it's not the case, a true shared service of that nature. And that's not, of course, what he was suggesting. But I started to think about it. I also sat with the my group of superintendents of similar socioeconomic in our DERG, just to get a sense of, you know, what structures they have. And they're very similar to our own, where there's a town finance director and a business director on the board side. So while I completely understand the intent and you know, finding some internal efficiencies. I guess I'm just not clear on the benefit that we would get or even the cost savings. But I did promise that I would bring this forward for you to discuss as a board. I know this is not the first time this has been brought up over the years. I sent you an older document that was done by Bloom Shapiro, talking about some of the efficiencies and shared services that might occur, not just in this area, but technologies, facilities, in areas like that. As you know, what came out of that was the purchasing agent, which has, you know, been successful, I believe. Again, I imagine this being a far more thoughtful approach as we look at you know, shared services and benefits in the future. But you know, I'm just not sure of the timing right now. But I wanted to begin that discussion with you as a board. And of course, Tanya, I've had the conversation as I felt it was necessary to have with Tanya, so she wasn't suddenly blindsided about why we're having this discussion now. So I wanted to open it up.
So before I open it up to everybody else, because I also spoke with Dan Rosenthal, and I do, just to sort of summarize some of the things that he was saying. He felt that it would form a more cooperative spirit among the boards and the offices, and that was part of the reason he was proposing it. And also providing a smoother transition, because we do now have a new business director. He was thinking that this would provide the chance for a smooth transition. But I will also reiterate what Dr. Rodriguez is saying, in that it does not fit a shared service model. You know, we sent, Dr. Rodriguez sent the shared service study that was done, but this really is not a shared service. It's adding to what's currently in place. So, Dan Rosenthal did feel that this cooperative spirit, though, would help identify areas that might be areas that we could find efficiencies. So the other piece is that I've been paying this conversation about shared services has been around for years and years. It's a long-standing hot topic. I've gone to at least 2 CABE workshops on shared services. And so I sent board members the CASBO white paper with examples of shared financial departments. At the CABE meeting that I attended, it was noted that the officials that contributed to that were reluctant to share some of the drawbacks. So just keep that in mind when you read the white paper, that there were some drawbacks. And I think Colchester and East Hampton were 2 other towns where this was discussed, but those 2 are small towns, much smaller than Newtown, I think. And then from a legal perspective, that sharing financial departments can be very tenuous. And of all the shared services, you know, these workshops talk about many shared services that do happen throughout the state, but of all the shared services that do occur, it is sometimes the most difficult, because finances really cut to the heart of the prerogative of the district. And so sometimes that is one of the hardest areas to start doing and we do have shared services. I know that Dr. Rodriguez was mentioning the previous, the Legislative Council had a committee that talked about a shared service, and they had several things that came out of that. So for example, our IT department sits with the municipal IT staff, so that they could share ideas across people, and they could fill in for each other where they needed to. So that's one of the things that came out of that. And let's see, what else did I want to add to that? And then there was a joint statement put out by Mr. Binkowski and Mr. Tate regarding what could be done to mutually benefit both departments. And I think the shared purchasing agent was one of those things that came out of that. So I think that's all I wanted. Oh, the Phoenix system was something that came out of the Bloom Shapiro study in 2011. And that was meant to, and that did save quite a bit of money that the municipal side was using the Phoenix system that was already in place for the Board of Education. But I think the Phoenix system is now no longer being supported. So we've moved to e-finance, and I'm not sure how much of the town is using that, but that was another thing that came out of these shared service conversations. So that's to give you a little bit of history. And I know perhaps Ms. Leidline has some more of that history that she's aware of, or Mr. Voros, but so now we'll open it up to discussions. Ms. Harriman Stites.
Yes, thank you for that, because I think it's important to clarify that this would not necessarily be a shared service. And I guess I just, if the chair would allow, I would like to ask Mrs. Vadas if she feels that she has a collaborative spirit with Bob Tate currently, because as far as I understood, and you did illuminate briefly, Ms. Koo, there is a spirit of collaboration between the two departments. So I just wanted to kind of hear from Tanya as to whether or not she felt like there was a partnership there already.
Just to put her on the spot a little
Sorry.
bit. Ms. Vadas?
Well, from the beginning, Mr. Tate and I have always worked very well together. I've always found him to be very helpful in the way of like accounting and the way the accounts are set up and structure wise. But I do honestly feel that we're very separate, different entities. You know, the town oversees what's happening in the town. And like you said, the financial, you know, benefit or well-being of the town. And we oversee our educational, you know, the education of our children. It's very different. But we have worked together as far as the e-finance system. He's on that also. And we've been sharing notes back and forth. We've been sharing some training back and forth. But I feel like I've worked very well with Mr. Tate in the past and going forward. I don't know how else I can add to that, but.
Right. I mean, I just want to say, I mean, I think that he is a great resource to utilize in a partnership capacity. And, you know, that is something that I would certainly celebrate and encourage. And I also support shared services. I think that that is something that we need to look towards doing more of. And I think we're heading down that road, and we have done some things to increase our shared services and what we can do together. I guess I just am not really following the train of thought so much. I don't see how it would really make things more efficient or save taxpayer dollars. So I guess, you know, unless someone could share with me how that might be the case, it wouldn't really be something that I would be in favor of.
Okay. Ms. Zukowski.
Yeah, just to get this straight. So what Dan is suggesting is that Ms. Vadas and all of the people under her move under Bob Tate. Is that correct?
Yes, well, no. What it would, we just talked briefly about kind of the structure. So looking at the town finance director, more like a CFO, and Tanya still being the business director, business manager, and sharing some of the, like the payroll account, things that naturally can be shared in that way, with some evaluative oversight. And I want to reiterate what Dr. Koo said, because one, and I think I missed that when I first kind of outlined this, was the collaborative spirit was really, you know, Bob Tate as the director of finance and really interacting with the other boards far more than we do, other than through the budget process, has that, you know, kind of built-in rapport and credibility and that kind of thing. And he saw that as sort of an internal benefit. So I do want to put that out because that was discussed.
Okay, so what I see is when you say shared services, it's really it's a three-headed dog, basically. You can have shared personnel, which is administrative. So somebody has evaluation rights over another person. somebody it's a boss underling type of relationship. And so you've got a question of, who makes the priorities. Shared spaces, which is something that we already do with the technology, in that it's really by sitting together, you get to know each other. And so you actually work better with each other. And then shared technology, which is more of a real cost cutting type of, it's a streamlining. That's what I've just heard everybody say. And my question in terms of all of this is I'd need to see what the direct benefit is. If we go with the administrative, we need to know what it is we lose. So what we might lose is the type of decision-making support that we get from the director of business and the director of finance, versus if it's really just the payroll and accounts payable sort of co-locating. So that they foster, they can cross train in town versus BOE, as opposed to payroll and accounts payable cross training in two different vertical areas. It's in that case, it's really just more of a sitting together, a shared space. There's all sorts of, for us to really, or for me to have a conversation that I would be satisfied with, we need a heck of a lot more particulars. And we would need to make sure that those particulars would justify losing the support we need for making decisions that are in the best interest of our school community and our students.
Yeah, and to be clear, you are mentioning some good ideas that have that could benefit, but this is a very specific proposal, not to bring together the accounting departments to sit together, it really is very specific about the reporting structure, I think. Yes, Ms. Zukowski.
Then we simply need to know what the benefits are, and we weigh those benefits against what the costs are. And if the benefits are, well, we can have cooperative spirit, you need to explain to me why we can't have cooperative spirit just simply by sharing space like we have with technology.
Okay. Mr. D'Elia?
So if I understand this correctly, they would set up Tanya would report to Bob Tate, and Bob Tate would evaluate Tanya. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that the proposal?
Well, that was part of the discussion.
So then if that is the case, then wouldn't Tanya be reporting to Dan? Basically through Bob, because Bob reports to Dan?
I don't think this was specifically outlined. I mean, it was suggested. So I don't know that we know the answers to that question. I don't know if you can have two people evaluating, but that is part of the proposal, that yes, Bob Tate would be part of the evaluation.
But Tanya has a contract with us, right? With the Board of Ed?
That we just signed, yes.
We have a contract in place with Tanya. We employ Tanya.
That is.
Sorry, Tanya, I hope you don't mind.
And a reporting structure.
And a reporting structure is already in place by it. Sorry, Deb. Debbie, you want to say something?
Ms. Lideline?
Go ahead, I'm done.
I'm just going to put this out there. I think in light of recent events and in light of recent comments, for me personally, this sort of strikes a nerve, and I don't like it. So that being said, we have but in this town for a reason. And if we move it to the structure that they are suggesting, does that then blur the lines between having the two separate budgets and the fact of how the monies are managed between the town and the district? And is that something that, and I don't know the answer to this, is that something that can actually, is that possible? Is that correct? Is that, I don't know, I guess blurring the lines between that? How does that look to the community? when you're saying there are two separate budgets, but the person who has the main oversight is the same person on both budgets. So I guess I struggle with that a little bit.
All right, Mr. D'Elia.
That's, you said that much quicker. That's exactly where I was going. I'm actually a little confused as to how this seems to just kind of make a big mess for me. It's just kind of gobbledygook everything together, and I don't know. Anyways, thank you, Debbie, for saying that.
All right. Anybody else want to add to the? I mean, as I said, it absolutely is one of the most difficult areas to, and again, we're saying shared services. This is not really shared services, but it is one of the most difficult areas to have crossover in, because of, and there are legal issues involved if you have negotiations going on with your unions, and the town, say the legislative council were not to accept the negotiation agreement that we came to, then there is some question about who represents whom in figuring that all out. All right. So is it fair to say that, do you want more information on this, or is it fair to say that we're done with this conversation? Ms. Dukowski?
I think you can give feedback and you can see what the response is, and then you can let us know what the response is, and then we can make our decision then.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. I will do that. All right, and that brings us to our discussion and possible action on the reentry of kindergarten through 6th grade schedule for Wednesdays. So Dr. Rodriguez, I'll let you introduce this and then we'll talk about.
Do you want me to make a motion now before we start discussing it?
Why don't we let Dr. Rodriguez introduce it and then
Okay.
we'll move to the motion. Thank you.
So this is a fairly simple proposal, and it is to hopefully support a 2-hour release on Wednesdays, even after our students return K-6 from the hybrid, which is scheduled for October the 5th. Through November the 2nd, the middle, as you know, middle and high school will be on hybrid still. And the teachers at the K-6, we believe, will need to continue to have the appropriate time to prepare, as they do now, for instruction of in-person and remote learning. We want them to have the consistency with that preparation as well, and to make this equitable. Some of our, all of our elementary teachers, it's not even just the in-person and the remote. They're actually putting together, still putting together paper and pencil tasks as well, because we don't want young ones staying on computers all day. So there's a lot in the instructional design, as you all know, that has gone into working this year. We are in the process of reviewing, just so you know, a plan for the middle school and high school returning in November, on November 2nd. And this schedule might also include ongoing release days when they come back in full. Again, we're looking at what our needs are to bring that level back safely. We, just like every other middle and high school, we're having trouble thinking about where they're going to eat safely and with no masks on. And it's far easier at the lower levels than it is at the upper levels. And I think, in lieu of just thinking about that, I want to make sure that what we're doing for the elementary is consistent and equitable as well. Again, I think having this time for our teachers is crucial. during a very difficult time. And it also allows the deep cleaning to still continue regardless of cohorting as they are during hybrid. But having that time in the buildings is beneficial. And it's also beneficial for our students to have that breath. I want to point that out, that it's just as beneficial to our students. I know there are districts everywhere with all kinds of, delayed openings and early release. We're not asking for much. I mean, I want to continue this as far as we can take it. I'm really just looking at giving them the time, just like the middle and high school teachers will have. And I know they come back November 2nd. I don't have a plan for you this evening, but I know that they're working on one, and it may include some early release time in that schedule as well. So.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. So now perhaps we should move to the motion. So I'll entertain a motion on this.
Can I just say one more thing? I did talk with All Star. This makes it very easy for them and better for them, because we would be having all students coming out on those half days. So if we ever look at in the future where our middle and high school have to have early release, it would be beneficial for All Star to also do that in fact, they might have to also do that at the K-6 level. So because it just works really closely together. We can't do one for certain grades and not others. And it's the way they do the pickups in other places. So I just wanted to point that out in the future.
Okay. Ms. Lideline?
I have a question, and then if after Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, I'd like to make a statement too. I'll be brief. My quick question is lunch included in the 2-hour early dismissal? Does students eat lunch before their early release?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I thought so, but I just wanted to double check. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. D'Elia, can you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I move to continue the 2-hour early release days on Wednesdays in K through 6 for deep cleaning of buildings and to support teacher preparation for both in-person and distance learners.
Okay. So Mr. D'Elia makes the motion.
I'll second that.
And Ms. Lideline seconds the motion. And then Mr. D'Elia, is it okay if we go to Ms. Lideline to speak first? Okay. Ms. Lideline?
For you too, Mr. D'Elia. I, being a middle school teacher, I have preps during the day, and they are precious, particularly in this climate where we are prepping for students who are learning virtually and students who are learning in the classroom. And if you add on to that the fact that we now have students who are going through regular fall illnesses who are in and out of our classroom, it's extremely challenging. And I know that my elementary grade counterparts have fewer preps than I do, and they are so precious, and they often lose them because they're dealing with kid issues that just can't wait. So I wholeheartedly support this. I think it's in the best interest of our students to allow our teachers to have the opportunity to prep for all of the different types of learning that is happening in their classroom at this point in time, and also to plan robust lessons that are going to help us to bridge the gap that we may or may not see as a result of the fact that we went through distance learning in the spring and continue to have this hybrid model in the fall. So I wholeheartedly support this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. D'Elia?
I just have a couple of questions. Maybe Dr. Rodriguez can answer them for me. Dr. Rodriguez, this is early dismissal for students only. Teachers will stay the full day and be in the building doing prep if that's where they are.
Yes, that will be preparation for teachers. Yes.
So it's not a half day for teachers. It's just a half day for students. And then is there any contractual issue, or do we haven't, does this bring up any issues with the contract that we're changing? Okay.
No, not at all.
And finally, should this motion does not have an end date, it's just open-ended, is that, should we do it that way, or should we have it through a certain time, or?
I think,
I don't know.
well, Dr. Koo, you and I spoke about this. We really didn't want to put an end date because I want you all to look at our proposal for 7 through 12. And at that point, we can make an assessment, but it really should be ongoing at this point, at least.
May I finish, Dr. Koo? I'm in full support. I'm an elementary teacher,
Well,
so I know
so you
exactly. Yeah, so this is a good thing if teachers are going to get those those are precious hours for the teachers. And they are losing a lot of time dealing with things that they weren't dealing with before. If a student has a runny nose, I don't know if the community realizes this, it's, you know, to the nurse and home, just even a runny nose, and, you know, it just stops everything. So it's very, for the little ones, this is a tremendous amount of help. So I'm in full support of this as well.
And as I can just tell you, having spoken at length, I think, Rebecca, you were at our climate and culture, and it really is that I think the theme that I'm hearing across the board, but a lot more at the elementary level, is overwhelmed, stressed. Their workload has just increased so much. You just gave one example. I can give you so many others that the elementary are facing. And you're right. You know, I think, Debbie, you said it best. They lose their prep a lot of the time for all of those reasons.
All right. Anybody else? Yes, Ms. Zukowski.
So, to add another dimension, let's talk about the parents and what their expectations or perhaps their preferences would be. So this is like a change in plans. And I'm sure whenever there's a change in plans, there's always a certain amount of a disruption to the families. In terms of the families that are in a position where they're trying to get back to work full time, is there anything that the school can do to provide childcare for K through 6 after school for those 2 hours? So still provide teachers the chance to, have extra time for prepping, but also for those parents that need it, would have an opportunity for maintaining the full 5-day schedule.
So we do have after school care through Ed Advance. And I believe even when we have early dismissals, that does still occur. I know it does. I also talked with Matt Arenello at the community center because they've been great partners, NYA and Community Center for Parents, through this, whether it's hybrid or a day, getting out early or any of that. They may continue to offer services. I believe they will. So there are options for parents, absolutely.
Now, this Ed Advance, is it at the schools themselves, or do the children move?
No, it's in our schools.
It
takes place in our school. It's not in every school. There are certain buildings. Anne's on. Anne, do you know what buildings? I forget what it is this year. I believe they moved one.
I think it's Reed has one, and
Reed is
one of the elementaries. I think it might be Sandy Hook and
I
Holly.
think it's Sandy Hook. There might be 3.
So there may be some disruption to busing then to get these kids to Sandy Hook.
I talked to Alan if we did do this, and parents, needed that childcare. We would take care of the busing, including even if the NYA or the community center were open to engaging more students in aftercare.
Okay.
Right now they're in the hybrid, so.
So one more question, if I may.
Yes, Ms. Zukowski.
So, you know, there's a lot of chatter in how some families, some parents feel that the hybrid is working quite well. Was any consideration given to letting, you know, we allow parents to opt to full distance? Then we say, so you've got a choice between full distance and full on-site, but was there any consideration for those parents that want to stay with hybrid and possibly thin out those classes?
Yeah, so this was a discussion not only amongst my own leadership team, but also across all districts. In fact, one neighboring district had a conversation at the board level with this as well just the other evening. No, it was considered, and we are adamant that, you know, the reason we went to hybrid, there was a purpose behind that. We eased in, we could have gone to full. And thanks for your support. We went to hybrid. It was a way to ease in safely, to practice all the mitigation strategies and appropriate, you know, excuse me, health, safety protocols, and also to practice that technology that we knew. What would it be like? Very different from March, where it was extremely interactive and students at home and students in the classroom would be learning. So all of that we felt necessitated an ease in back to school. So the hybrid, though, was meant for minimizing populations, cohorting. If you had a certain number of cases and you saw the trends going up, that truly, at the, you know, when it comes to the health department and the state, that was what hybrid was created for. We feel that now that we're moving to all in, parents still have the choice. You can return your students just as they would have in the beginning of, right, coming back to school. You had two choices, coming back in full or going to remote. And the state actually guided us in saying, you must give that option to parents. To now say we're going back in full and still offering the hybrid makes very little sense, because you've lost your cohorting. Now it's really a matter of, well, I don't feel safe enough to send them every day, but I feel safe enough to send them 2 days out of the week, which, you know, if you think logically, it's disruptive to the classroom. It's hard enough for teachers to teach the predictable enrollment in their class and those that are out there. And I know Mrs. Leidline, I'm sure, and Mr. D'Elia, who do this daily, understand what I'm talking about. We made a commitment that we're gonna follow what we had intended, that we're not on hybrid any longer. We feel confident that we can come back in full across the district, hopefully. And when hybrid, if that should ever be the case, it will be now because of the trends going up and the number of positive cases. And that means we're now going back to cohorting. We're now making, you see, there's a difference in what the purpose of hybrid really is. So parents still have the option. They can feel comfortable sending students in, or if not, then they can certainly keep them home.
So one more question for you, and then I'll stop. So part of the hybrid was also to get a sense of how workable everything was. So the teachers, have you gotten feedback in terms of how they feel the classrooms worked in terms of the ability to social distance, even especially kids who are kindergarten and first grade, and whether they, you know, whether that gets just harder and harder as classes get bigger and bigger, or as classes essentially double in size?
Well, I'm not sure they will double, because there will still be, and again, I'm sending out, let me start by saying I'm sending out a survey. It's either going out this evening, I don't know, I know that Carmela is sending it out probably first thing in the morning. It's all put together, and this will ask the question, now that we're coming back and you know the the conditions out there, would you send your students back all in? Or would you keep them home on remote learning? That's your choice. And then the third question is, again, bus transportation, so we get a handle on that. So it will be interesting to see how people feel. Of course, coming back in hybrid, it's half the population. So it eased people's minds in coming back, kind of putting a toe in the water, even though it was, by all means, by our cases and the trends, by all means, we could have come back in full. We chose not, and other districts did. New Fairfield was back in full from day one. So there are districts that did choose to just do it. I felt, and I feel strongly that it was successful because of that, to get people feeling at ease, especially the teachers. So yes, there will be more students, but remember, our initial plan, the reason we had that reentry committee was to make sure that we could make those accommodations so that it would be safe when we anticipated all in. That was what the plan was designed to do. So again, we feel comfortable. We have to continue to move or we'll never get there. And again, this could all change in a month. I don't know. And I say that every day. I don't know what will happen in a month. All I know is what we need to do to move forward.
Okay, Ms. Harriman states, we're getting a little bit, not just a little bit, we're getting off topic. But
No, I had a question on the original motion.
okay.
And a comment. So like Dr. Rodrigue noted, I was in the culture and climate meeting, and obviously this was expressed by the teachers as something that they really felt was necessary in order for them to properly accommodate their needs and the needs of their students. And so for that reason, I'm in support of it. But I do echo some of Mrs. Zakowski's statements about working families and making sure that we are being cognizant that this may be a burden on those families who thought that we were likely going back full time October 5th. So I do just want to acknowledge that may be an issue. And so hopefully we can get this wrapped up tonight so that they have plenty of advance notice to make those accommodations for their families. And so hopefully NYA and the community center will be able to provide services, but those services do cost money. So I just want to acknowledge that this is not something that a decision that we're making lightly without consideration to the family's needs that have been struggling through this time as well. But I do know that it is absolutely the best thing for our learners and for our teachers. And so for that reason, I support it.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to? Mr. Cruson?
I knew this was going to happen, but I'm going to fall on the other side of everyone else on this. I am 100% against this. It was when we discussed going to hybrid in the first place, I was against doing that. I was all for the all in at the get-go, but I find that preferable to this proposal. I don't think that a temporary early dismissal on Wednesdays is beneficial I don't think it's what's best for the students. It's a loss of education time in a time when we need the education time. Someone is likely going to point out, well, right now we have half days on Wednesdays anyway, so it's not a loss over what we currently have. But I happen to know that there are teachers out there that utilize the time after dismissal to meet with students. They use that as educational time, and that won't be possible it won't be as easily possible if there are students transporting from the school buildings on those Wednesdays when school ends. I think the loss of consistency we talk about wanting consistency for the students, and having this new all-in model that is temporary removes some of that consistency from those students' schedules. They don't know, oh, I'm all in, I'm there 5 days a week. No, it's going to be, oh, I'm there except on Wednesday, half days now, but down the line, they might be there 5 days. So now we've essentially added a fourth model. cases have been made for the parents. I'm not quite as focused. I do agree that there is a disruption to the parents, both the schedules, the fact that all these aftercare programs cost money and have caps, so there's no guarantees you'll be able to get into them. But that's not my main concern. My main concern is around the loss of education time, the consistency for the students, and whether it's really what's best. If we're not ready to go back to full time, it seems to me like we have to stay on the hybrid. If there is that much, and this is what I spoke to this back in the summer, which was I was afraid we were going to go hybrid and there wouldn't be a comfort level and we wouldn't make it to full in. But if that's the case, I mean, that's what we have to do for the safety of the students and to maintain the best we can. That's kind of where I feel we have to go. So I'm not in favor of doing an all-in model with a half day on Wednesdays. And I tried to keep an open mind, even though I knew this was coming, but I haven't heard anything that convinces me that it is better than I fear it is. And I will get off my soapbox there.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gladline?
I just want to ask a clarification question. Are we asking to do this because, or are we being asked to do this because we feel as though it's not safe for the students to return 5 days a week full time? Or are we doing this to provide extra time for planning to make sure that the education being delivered is at an optimal level for every type of learner that we're going to be having going forward as a result of distance learning, illnesses, and in-classroom learning?
Yes, exactly that. It isn't about the safety. If you think about it, in the hybrid, they definitely looked at Wednesdays as being lighter, so that they certainly can still meet with students distance learning wise. It was really around, they still need that planning time. And the K-6 will lose that. And 7-12 will still have that.
Okay.
So it is about all of those things that you outlined. It isn't about not being able to come back in full and be safe. It isn't about that.
Mr. Voros, did you have something?
Yes, I'm in complete agreement. The teachers need that time for preparation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Zukowski?
Just one last. So now you just said that, you know, the 7th and 12th to 12th would still have that flexibility on Wednesday and the K through 6 wouldn't. So part of this is also teacher equity across the different grades. And then when the 7 through 12 go back full, we would then again possibly say at that point it would be actually full on site.
And that's why I said when the question was asked, we can always look at this in November when you see the plan for 7 through 12, and that isn't finalized yet. But I want to make sure that we're always looking at equity between teachers as well.
Now, would we meet the 900 hours of instruction, or is even if we go the full year where we lose 2 hours every week?
Yes, I believe we've looked at that and we do meet the 900 hours. Is that correct, Ann?
Well, we haven't added it up because we don't know how long that we would be sustaining that. So I think there's a certain degree of wait and see. And I just wanted to add on to what Dr. Rodriguez said is we paid a lot of attention to the 900 hours in developing our plan. That's part of the reason the Wednesdays look the way they do now. As Mr. Gruson pointed out, the teachers are working a full day on Wednesday and students are available to meet with their teachers in small groups or get support. So we counted those hours as instructional hours. There's many other districts right now who are having much less instructional time. So I know that we can't bank on what the state will decide down the road, but I feel that when I compare the hours that we are putting in so far, it's exceeding a lot of what the other districts are doing. So it's something I think we have to pay attention to. We can't lose sight of it. It's a good question, but we also don't know how long this would sustain.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Lideline, are you raising your hand or are you just resting it? Okay. I'll just add that, I hear the concerns about the parent piece because we heard a lot from parents early on. And so I do hear that piece, and I know that we're very cognizant of that. But also when we approved the plans, we had no experience with this kind of teaching. It was completely new and different to us. Not even last spring was like this. And our district staff has done really a heroic job of making sure that the technology is working and that the students both in and out of school are still engaged and learning. And I'm just amazed at the fact that we're keeping up with where they should be, I think, right now. And we'll have yet to find out if that is, when we do our assessments at some point in time. But I'm just amazed at how much is going on right now. It's just, it overwhelms me sometimes when I think about where we are in comparison to where we were last spring. And so teachers have gone above and beyond, and our staff has gone above and beyond, our technology staff, and getting all of that technology up and working. And if we can support the work that our teachers are doing by doing this, I really wholeheartedly support it. And so that's where I will land on this. So would anybody else like to add before we vote on it? All right, sensing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? All right, so all are in favor except for Mr. Kusan is opposed, and motion passes. All right, and that brings us to our second public participation. So I would invite anybody who is on the phone who would like to address the board, if you could keep your comments to under 3 minutes and introduce yourself to us with your name and address. You can unmute yourself with a *6. Is there anybody who would like to address the board? I see a phone, but I don't hear anybody speaking. So, is there anybody?
Hi. Yes, I have a comment.
Hi. If you could tell us your name and address for the record.
Of course. My name is Stephanie Strover, and my address is 7 Possum Ridge Road. And I have a 4th grader and a 2nd grader at Hedda Meadow. First of all, I appreciate everything that the board's doing, and I want to make sure that it's on the record how thankful I am for all of the care that's been given to all of the, very involved planning. I want to speak on behalf of parents because I think that we get, there was a little bit of commentary about parents, but it was very glossed over. I'm paying $200 a week, so that's $1,000 a month for my kids to go part-time to the NYA. That's a big chunk of money for our budget, so that they can distance learn while I work and my husband works. And I only have 2 children. So anybody who has more than 2 kids are going to pay $100 more per week. So $400 more per month to be able to do that. And so I just really want to drive home that that's not just a simple burden on parents. That's expensive. And I think that it's important to consider with more than just the glossing. And that's all I want to say, because it's very difficult on parents, especially parents with more kids, to be able to balance all of the changes and all of the time needing to be spent away from work to help troubleshoot things and get people where they need to go in order to make this work for everybody. And we have to have our livelihoods So thank you very much for your listening ear, and carry on. And I look forward to continuing to see the great things that we do.
Thank you. We appreciate your listening to the meeting and sharing your comments with us this evening. And thank you for being here. Is there anybody else who would like to address the board? You can *6, unmute yourself. I see a lot of phones. I just don't see anybody speaking up. All right, if there are no more comments, we'll close out public participation, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So Mr. Cruson makes the motion.
Second.
And Ms. Harriman Stites seconds. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Have a good week. 2 weeks until we see you again. Good night.
Night.